The road to riches is paved with borrowed money. I want to talk about William Nickerson and his approach to real estate investment. William Nickerson wrote a book in 1959 called How I Turned $1,000 into $1,000,000 in Real Estate in My Spare Time. Nickerson's approach was pretty straightforward, and there's just a few key elements that I want to cover now. This book was written so long ago, 50 plus years ago. You might ask, is it still relevant? And yeah, it really is. A lot of these strategies in his book, or books, he wrote several on real estate investing, plus some other books, are as relevant today as they were then. In fact, I think nowadays we get distracted by how do we make a quick buck, or what about the real estate bubble and subsequent collapse, and what about lending? These things are obviously important elements of the last 10 years, but there's some fundamentals that Nickerson covers that are just as important now. First of all, let's talk about amounts of money. Obviously, we've had a lot of inflation in the last 50 plus years. So what is that $1,000 now? What is that $1 million, or as subsequent revisions of the book, $3 million and $5 million? Well, the answer is about 10x since 1959, 1963 or so, when he was first writing his real estate books, so that we could entitle his book now, How I Turned $10,000 into $50 million in real estate in my spare time. That's a chunk of change, especially for a guy who just had a day job and saved $50 a month up for his first down payment on a duplex. So it's not like he started with a lot of money or started with a whole lot of debt to get it rolling. He didn't. What he did do was he bought properties, he improved them so he could get more rent out of them, and then he would sell them and roll the profit into bigger properties and better properties, and then repeat the process. Improve the properties, didn't spend a lot of money typically. He would look at, what can I do to this property to make it more desirable to renters so that I can get a better return on them? And then he didn't sell them retail like you might sell a single family home. He would sell them to other investors. And he typically bought at a 10% cap rate, and he typically sold at a 10% cap rate. So there was nothing necessarily spectacular about buying at bottom dollar or selling at top dollar. Now, he didn't use the term cap rate, but the idea behind that is he would buy a property for 10 times its net earnings, what it would earn after all expenses and before debt, and sell it for about that same amount of money. Again, we add a zero to the numbers that he wrote about then to come up with approximate numbers today. He might spend back then $7,000 a unit or $10,000 a unit. So we could say $70,000 to $100,000 now. Now, these weren't single-family homes; they were apartment units, so they were pretty nice, or they were in good, nice areas like San Diego to San Francisco, mostly coastal California. Just to comment about that, we look at coastal California over the last 50 years, and we know they've had great population growth and also substantial appreciation in the real estate values the last 5 or 6 years notwithstanding. He showed in his books, especially some subsequent books, about how you could do this in most parts of the country, even parts of the country that were already in decline. Some parts of the Rust Belt were already in decline, and he showed examples of how his system worked there too. Okay, so we've talked about the amounts of money, and he would use the term pyramiding to continue to grow into bigger and better properties, where he started with duplexes, triplexes, and quads. After several years, it was small apartment complexes, and then after a decade or two, it was 40-unit properties or 60-unit properties, and it was all in a logical progression. There was no quantum leap anywhere along the way. He would typically did his own property management early on, but then he would hire individuals who lived in his complex to manage for them and exchange free rent and sometimes payment on top of that. So again, a pretty simple approach. As far as leverage goes, he typically would put down 20% to 30% and borrow 70 to 80%. So where he talked about using leverage a lot, he wasn't necessarily borrowing 90% or 100% or 115% like we saw several years ago that got so many people into trouble. But what he would do is, as he paid down mortgages, which he did pay them down, they typically had 15-year amortizations, so he paid them down pretty quickly. He would buy new properties and borrow to the max again and again to the max. For him was 80% or so. So those are the two main things. Keep using leverage so that while his cap rates were 10%, his cash on cash return, again, he wouldn't use that term, that's what he's talking about, was 20% or above. And if you plug 20% returns on your equity or your cash into the rule of 72, you see how long it takes to build a substantial amount of money. And when you're talking about decades, it doesn't take that long at all, as long as you keep your money working really hard. And he did that by, again, keep upgrading those properties, getting into better and bigger properties, and secondarily, making sure you continue to use leverage. If you like talking about this and learning about this type of thing, you might check out my favorite real estate forum over at biggerpockets.com and talk about William Nickerson or any other author or any other guru with a lot of people who are pretty fanatical about real estate investing and love to talk about it.